I need a game for my Christmas special, but there just aren't that many snow-themed games. I guess I'll just have to cancel Spreading Christmas Cheer this year. Dear Rob, I have left you in possession of a small gift which I am requesting you look after while I go on holiday. I've left it wrapped to avoid it running away. Please look after it, and don't unwrap it, and don't let it out of your sight. What is this? It looks like the ape has escaped. Hello and welcome to Rob's Retro Reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at Ape Escape 2. But Rob, I hear you ask, you've not reviewed Ape Escape 1 yet, why start with the sequel? Well, to you I say, I have reviewed Ape Escape 1 and it's available to read on my blog, which is linked below in the description. So there. Ape Escape 2 is a 3D collectathon platformer that was developed by Sony Computer Entertainment Japan Studio and published by Sony Computer Entertainment in 2002 for the PlayStation 2. It is the direct sequel to Ape Escape, which is famous for being the first game to require the use of the DualShock controller, which was a pretty big deal at the time. Ape Escape 2 is now available as a PS2 classic on PS4, and it's actually very well priced unlike some of the other games on there. All of the footage of Ape Escape 2 in this review is taken directly from the PS4 version of the game. The only differences between the original and the PS4 port is that the graphics are smoothed and upscaled to 1080p, and it has trophy support. As with the first game, there are some huge regional differences between the American NTSC version of the game and the European PAL version. The European one keeps the Japanese names for the characters, even renaming some returning characters that had English names in the first game, which is a bit confusing, whereas the American one gives them new English names. The voice acting is also different depending on which version you're playing, which happened in the first game too. So because I live in England, I played the European version and will be referring to the characters with the names they are given in that. So for example, the protagonist's name is Hikaru, rather than Jimmy. It was released 3 years after the original Ape Escape, so you would think with all that time they would be able to make a game that stands up to the original, if not surpasses it. The game opens with a cutscene showing the Professor, who was introduced in the first game, communicating with Hikaru and Pippochi, characters who are new to the series. Pippochi is a small monkey who seems to be Hikaru's pet. The Professor tells Hikaru to send along a new batch of monkey pants to the monkey park using a teleportation device, which I assume was built after giving up with the time travel machine he was working on in the first game. Hikaru accidentally sends across some monkey helmets, which not only destroys the teleporter, but also gives Spectre, the evil monkey mastermind from the last game who tried to take over the world, a helmet, allowing him and a load of other monkeys to escape the park and cause havoc. Natsumi, previously named Katie, who is the Professor's assistant and granddaughter, asks you to go out and capture the monkeys before they can cause too much damage and before the Professor finds out what you've done. I feel like the introduction cutscene doesn't do a very good job of telling us who the main character is. He just sort of appears and we're supposed to accept him, while Spike from the previous game is nowhere to be seen. It also doesn't do a very good job of introducing us to Pippochi. We're not told who he is or where he came from, and we're not told why he has a monkey helmet. After travelling around the world using a rebuilt teleporter in Natsumi's house, Hikaru bumps into the Professor and tells him about the monkeys escaping and causing the lab to be destroyed. The Professor then proceeds to go back home to help fix the mess and takes Pippochi with him, probably assuming that Hikaru won't be able to keep him safe because he's a bumbling idiot, which is fair enough. However, a little bit later, Pippochi goes missing, presumably having either ran away or having been kidnapped, and Hikaru heroically sets off to find him. He eventually finds Pippochi, but straight after, he gets kidnapped again by Spectre's elite monkeys named the Freaky Monkey 5. Spectre says that they will use Pippochi's helmet to extract human data to put into a device called the lethargy laser, which will allow monkeys to rule the world and become the dominant species. Eventually, he locates Spectre's base, which happens to be on the moon somehow. Hikaru eventually makes his way through the fortress and confronts Spectre, who gets into a giant mechanical monkey suit and attempts to destroy you, but he is quickly defeated. He then retreats to the switch for the lethargy laser. Wait a minute, if Spectre had the lethargy laser built and ready to fire all this time, why didn't he just do that before Hikaru even got there? That doesn't make sense, and it's a pretty obvious plot hole even for a kid's game.
Anyway, Hikaru then rushes over to Spectre and catches him before he can activate the laser. Game over, you win.
But wait, that's not the end of our tale.
In a post-credits scene, we are notified that Spectre has escaped containment. He's been captured for about 2 minutes and has already escaped. Seriously, like, what is the Professor and Natsumi messing about at? He's now hiding in an unknown location, and Hikaru now needs to go out and capture the remaining monkeys while Spectre's location is found. After the long journey of capturing all the remaining monkeys, bringing the total to 299, Hikaru learns Spectre is on a secret base on the dark side of the moon.
What is it with Spectre's sudden obsession with building bases on the moon?
Hikaru then travels to the moon once again to put an end to Spectre's plan once and for all using the power of friendship.
And of course a good old punch to the face works too.
After finally properly defeating Spectre, we cut to Earth where Natsumi and the Professor are hanging the washing out. They just sent a kid to the moon to battle a threat to the entire Earth, and all they can do is stand around in the garden hanging washing out. Shows how much they care about child safety. Then, we finally get to see Spike, who's now been renamed Kakeru. He runs up to the lab and apparently knows that Hikaru has been off capturing monkeys and fighting Spectre this whole time, and yet has done nothing to help. He basically just asks how things are going, and then that's it. Hikaru then crashes down to Earth having caught Spectre and once again accidentally destroys the Professor's lab. Laughs all around.
I feel very disappointed with the plot of Ape Escape 2. It's not like the original was a masterclass in storytelling, but it made sense and it made the characters likeable and you understood the motives.
In Ape Escape 2 it feels like it's a repeat of the first game but with much less at stake and completely ruining Spectre as a villain. He hardly even shows up, and when he does he never comes across as a threat. If anything, he comes across as a bit of an idiot. We never really learn who Hikaru and Pipochi are even after the terrible introduction at the start of the game. While I appreciate the cameo of Spike, aka Kakeru, at the end, it's very random and underwhelming. What would have been so much better is if Spectre won the final fight with Hikaru, and as he was about to fire his newly built lethargy laser, Spike jumps in and you have a final boss fight, but this time playing as Spike and you properly defeat Spectre. But instead we get this awkward introduction to Spike and it doesn't make very much sense. Hikaru isn't even mentioned in Ape Escape 1, so it's weird that all of a sudden Spike seems to be friends with him. Although upon inspection of the manual they're actually cousins apparently. The whole thing just feels underdeveloped.
But despite the story being subpar, the reason we're all here is for the gameplay, and I'm happy to say that Ape Escape 2 does several things better than the first game. Unfortunately, it also does some things worse than the first game, which makes it difficult to appreciate the things it does better. I just came into it expecting a more expanded experience, when what I got was more of the same.
For those new to the series, let me quickly go through how the game works. The main objective is to platform your way through openly designed levels, think Spyro the Dragon sized stages, catching a certain number of monkeys in the process. After doing this, you clear the level, unlock a new one, and sometimes get a new gadget which allows you to solve more complex puzzles or move over different types of terrain. After beating 3 or sometimes 4 levels, you encounter a boss which puts your gadgets and your skill as a player to the test. The levels become much larger and complicated as the game goes on, often resulting in you needing to use many gadgets in the same stage. To catch monkeys, you run up to them and use a gadget called the monkey net. But with some monkeys it's not as simple as that. Some will be fast, some will be aggressive, and some will have weapons or vehicles. You'll need to be a bit tactical in which monkeys you capture first and how you go about doing it. There is a basic stealth mechanic which allows you to crawl across the floor to remain undetected and then capture the monkey while unaware. Or, sometimes the best strategy is to run in and capture as many monkeys as you can as quickly as possible. Using the monkey radar, you'll be able to scan the area for monkeys and see the monkeys' stats to help you judge what course of action would be best. There are also weapons you can use, the primary one being the stun club, which you can use to hit standard enemies and kill them, or use it on the monkeys to temporarily knock them out so they're easier to catch. The combat is basic and normally just consists of you hitting something a couple of times, but certain enemies are a bit more difficult to defeat, wearing armour or having weak points which you'll need to attack.
A fun little extra thrown into Ape Escape is that when you use the monkey radar to scan for monkeys, you can see their names and a little description about them, which are individual and often quite humorous.
If this all sounds familiar, it's because this is exactly the same gameplay mechanics and structure that the first game had. The only real difference is that rather than travelling through time, you're travelling around the world using a teleporter. There are a few differences between Ape Escape 2 and the original though. You can now skip the gadget tutorials, whereas in the original they were forced on you every time you got a new one. The hub area has a few extra features and is a lot smaller, giving you quicker access to all of the different sections, but perhaps one of the best changes to Ape Escape 2 is that it now has proper boss battles in the form of the Freaky Monkey 5. For the most part, these bosses are actually quite good, with the exception of Blue Monkey, who will just run at you constantly so you can hit him. I actually found myself struggling slightly with certain bosses before working out their attack patterns, which is great because that means it isn't too predictable. Pink Monkey is probably the most memorable boss in the game, not because of the battle itself, but because Pink Monkey herself is quite a funny character, going from a pop star wannabe to a superpowered telekinetic force to be reckoned with.
There's also a boss with a fat yellow sumo monkey, who you beat by violently smashing its teeth out with a bat.
There are actually some interesting boss designs in Ape Escape 2, so it makes me happy that they're more of a feature compared to Ape Escape 1, not having much of an emphasis on the boss battles. The gold chips from the first game are now gold coins, and rather than being Ape Escape's equivalent of Super Mario coins, Ape Escape 2's coins don't give you lives for collecting 100. Rather, you can collect up to 999 of them, and use them to get rewards from the gotcha box in the hub area. In this box, you'll find concept art, enemy stills, music from the game, comics, minigames, but by far the best reward, monkey fables. These monkey fables are short stories which are normally twists on classic children's stories. They're all rewritten to be about monkeys, and some of them end abruptly in a very humorous way, such as the Three Little Pigs parody which ends with the three monkeys being captured rather than the final brick house protecting them.
There's also a story which literally ends with, and I quote, a rotting monkey corpse floating down a river. I don't know what's worse, rotting monkey corpses or smashing monkeys' teeth out with a bat.
One of my criticisms of the first game is how the vehicle sections were quite underutilised. While it was nice to have them there, it was never really expanded on enough, and I'm sorry to say that Ape Escape 2 does nothing to fix this issue, and in some cases it's even worse. A new mech suit vehicle is introduced, but it's tediously slow and totally unnecessary. The game wouldn't have been missing anything if this section wasn't in it. If the mech moved quicker and there was more of a challenge involved, I would have enjoyed it, but as it stands it's just quite boring. All of the vehicles from the first game make a return, and the only one which feels slightly more expanded on is the tank, which is weird because that was the only one in the first game which felt expanded on too. But even then it could have been put to better use, maybe in a boss fight? It just feels like the vehicles are introduced and then that's it. You use them to get from point A to B, but they never really come in handy for anything other than transport. As well as the vehicles coming back for the sequel, all of the gadgets from the original game make a return in Ape Escape 2, and all of them work almost exactly the same as they did before. The Stun Club, Magic Punch, RC Car, Monkey Net and Water Net all work exactly the same, whereas the Monkey Radar has been adjusted to allow you to see where a monkey is vertically. If a monkey is above you, the radar will tilt upwards to give you a better understanding on where exactly you're supposed to be looking. The slingshot now goes into first person mode automatically when you aim, which is much better than going into third person aiming like in Ape Escape 1. But the biggest change to the returning gadgets is the Skyflyer, which was my favourite in the original game. The issue with this new Skyflyer is that rather than allowing you to move forward and take flight at the same time like in the original, in Ape Escape 2 you'll jump forward, activate the Skyflyer, and be stopped from moving until you reach your maximum height. It feels very blocky because of the sudden loss of momentum, and it's a mistake I don't understand because they got it right with the first game. The new gadgets are terrible additions. There's a banana rang which is used about 5 times in the whole game, and it allows you to attract hungry monkeys out of hiding places. The electromagnet is used to move metal blocks in order to clear paths or to create platforms, and then there's the water cannon, which is used to put fires out and rotate water wheels. The main reason I liked the gadgets in Ape Escape 1 is because they all felt useful in multiple different ways. The RC car, for example, made for a great weapon, but could also be used to solve basic switch puzzles and to scare monkeys out of maze areas. The banana rang, however, is basically just used for the sole purpose of getting monkeys out of their hiding places. It's too context sensitive. Sure, you can use it as a ranged weapon, but why would you when you have the slingshot, which is more accurate and versatile? The water cannon and electromagnet share this same problem. They just aren't fun to use and aren't used enough to make them feel worthwhile.
That really shows that you're a boy. I'd never be able to handle a place like that.
You know, there's nothing quite like a bit of casual sexism in a children's game.
A much smaller issue I have is that while the gotcha box is a great idea and I much prefer it to the standard Super Mario coin system in Ape Escape 1, it takes way too long to get the unlockables from the box. You have to stand on a pressure pad and wait for the coins to go into the machine, hit a switch, wait for the prize to roll down from the machine, hit the prize to open it, and then walk over to it and collect it. Then repeat this over and over again for every single prize you unlock. Bearing in mind that you only need 10 coins to unlock a prize, you're going to be doing this for a very long time if you have a lot of coins. A much better system would have been to have said how many coins you want to put into the machine and given you multiple prizes at the same time. Another issue with this gotcha box system is that there's no reason to just not put all of your coins into the machine. You don't spend them on anything other than the gotcha box, so why wouldn't you put them all into it anyway? Perhaps a separate store where you can buy lives, minigames, health and different pellet types for your slingshot would have added a bit more complexity to the coin system rather than it just being random what you get out of the box every time. Just like in the first game, you can unlock 3 minigames in Ape Escape 2, which are Dance Monkey Dance, a very basic rhythm game where you need to move the analog sticks in certain directions to the beat of music, which mimics dancing. That's the worst minigame just because it's a bit boring and once you've done one level, you've done them all. Then the next game you unlock is Monkey Climber, where you need to move the analog sticks to move your arms, like in Little Big Planet, and grab ropes that move sporadically and pull yourself up to make your way to the bananas and collect them all. This can be quite challenging and fun, but the 2-player mode leaves a lot to be desired. It would have been amazing to have a co-op mode in this, or at least a more fleshed out competitive mode, but the highlight of Ape Escape 2's minigames is Monkey Football.
Fun fact, did you know that in America, monkey football is called monkey soccer? It's actually quite cool how many small regional differences there are in Ape Escape. You can really tell that the creators wanted to go that extra mile to make it appeal to different cultures.
As you would expect, Monkey Football is a very basic football game where you play as monkeys. I don't particularly like football games, but there's just something about this that I actually find quite addicting and fun. It's probably just more appealing to me because it's got bright colours, power-ups, and instead of sports people I don't recognise or care about, it's got monkeys. This one is particularly fun on 2-player. Getting back to the main game now though, after beating Spectre and capturing him, he escapes once again, and you need to backtrack through all the levels to capture the remaining monkeys. While this gives a great sense of progression because you can now whiz through them and get monkeys that were previously unobtainable with your new gadgets, it does sometimes start to feel like it's padding the game out. In some levels, there's no reason why you couldn't have caught all the monkeys on your first time through, and the fact you need to play through all of the levels again can make the experience start to feel tedious, especially with the later levels which get quite long. You should have been able to have fully completed some of the later levels on your first playthrough to avoid having to do them over again. After finally catching all of the monkeys, you unlock the final boss, where you have a one-on-one fight with Spectre himself. This is easily the toughest boss in the game, and it can actually take quite a few attempts to learn his attack patterns, but when you beat him, that's it, right? You finish the game? Well no, there is actually quite a lot of post-game content, even after catching all 300 monkeys, which in itself is technically post-game because to get the normal ending you don't need all the monkeys. You've got the time trial mode which makes a return from the first game, but you also have a new game plus mode where you can play as Spike, or rather Kakeru, from Ape Escape 1. This is good because it gives you more of a reason to keep playing, but it is just the exact same game all over again with a reskinned main character, although it is easier to get through because you have all of the gadgets from the start of the game. As much as this is a really cool reward for finishing the game with all the monkeys, I do feel like they could have done more with this. For example, the gadgets could have been reskinned to look the same as they did in Ape Escape 1.
And upon completing a level, Spike should have said,
"Well done!"
like in the first game, rather than
Yeah!
Also, his character model doesn't look very well made. There's just something that looks off. It just looks unofficial somehow. But still, it's a great completion bonus just for the fact you get to play as the main character from the first game, who, if you couldn't already tell, is a much better character than Hikaru, at least in my opinion. Generally, the level design is very good and I have hardly anything to complain about. Sure, it can be quite easy at times, but some of the monkeys are actually quite well hidden and the bosses can be challenging, so it's not like you can just breeze through the whole thing without paying attention. However, there is one section of the game which I hate. This stupid magnet section in the moon base level. It's so boring and it takes forever, it adds nothing to the overall experience, and it's the only point in the whole game where I got bored and thought that the game was dragging on a bit. This room shouldn't have been put into the game, it's terrible. It's not even like it's hard, it's just time consuming, you spend so much time just sitting and doing nothing hanging onto walls. But other than this, the levels are really well designed and extremely fun to go through. One of the most instant differences going from Ape Escape 1 to the sequel is the graphics. Ape Escape being on the PS2 meant that the quality of visuals could be much greater. The colours are more vibrant and varied, and the animation is more smooth and emotive. The PS4 port looks even better than the original PS2 version, being upscaled to 1080p and with a smoothing filter. Despite the PS4 port being the higher quality version, it does have some graphics glitches that aren't present in the original that happens during screen transitions and when entering and exiting certain levels. But these are minor and are most likely a product of the way the PS4 version is emulated. The best thing about Ape Escape 2 over its predecessor though, isn't just the graphics quality, it's the level themes and how much more varied they are this time around. You go from haunted mansions to snowy mountains, to beaches, to pirate islands, to military bases, to scientific installations, and many more. The themes aren't grouped together either, so this keeps things very varied and interesting, way more so than the original game. The monkeys are a lot more animated this time around and will wear different outfits depending on their characteristics and what level they're in, which is charming and funny. They're extremely expressive and this adds so much charm to the entire experience.
The funniest part of the whole game is when you walk into a monkey spa, only to be confronted with this.
The monkeys' names are much funnier this time around too, and they often reference pop culture. There's a level with Star Wars monkeys, Hollywood monkeys, sporting monkeys, gangster monkeys, and way more to keep you entertained as you go about completing the levels. It's really this humour that separates Ape Escape from any other platformer. One thing that hasn't changed much from the first game though, is that the standard enemies, the ones that aren't monkeys, look so boring and don't even make sense with the plot. Where do they come from and what the hell even is this? If Spectre was shown to have created robots that acted as the standard enemies, I would understand their inclusion, but the designs of them are completely random and it makes them unmemorable, which is in stark contrast to the main monkey enemies, which are extremely memorable and interesting. The design of the main character is quite poor too. It's not that he looks particularly bad, it's just that he looks exactly the same as the protagonist from the first game. I wouldn't be surprised if most people thought that he was the same character when they first played it. The general personality of Hikaru puts me off too. He's an idiot, and he comes out of nowhere with his stupid little monkey pet.
And what is with that ridiculous bandage across his nose for the entire game?
Humans never stop trying. That's what gives us a future.
The controls are exactly the same as the first game. I guess it's a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and that's fair enough because despite the unusual qualities of Ape Escape's controls, they are actually really intuitive when you get over that initial hurdle. Basically, unlike most games, the X, circle, square and triangle buttons aren't used as your primary command inputs. Rather, they simply switch between 4 different gadgets you have on your quick select. The way you attack and use your gadgets is with the right analog stick. Moving it forward will move the gadget forward, and moving it backwards will move the gadget behind you. Simple, right? Well, with the more complicated gadgets, you'll need to be more specific with how you move the stick. For example, with the Skyflyer, you need to rotate it in circles to mimic a propeller to make it send you into the air. It sounds gimmicky, and it is gimmicky, but it also feels natural after playing it for a few minutes, and you can always practice in the training areas if you find yourself struggling. A couple of less important things have been slightly modified, like now being able to move while spinning around with the stun club, and the swimming has been changed so you have much more control and it's a lot less awkward to dive. In the original game, you had to click R3 to dive, which didn't feel natural, whereas now you go up and down by moving the right stick up and down. A big problem with the swimming though is how slow you move in water. In Ape Escape 1 the R1 button made you swim faster in any direction, but now it just makes you swim straight to the surface. There isn't a way to quickly swim in any direction you want, so these sections can be a little bit tedious because of how slowly you move. The camera is controlled in exactly the same way as it was in the first game, which isn't a bad thing because I appreciated the degree of control you had over it, and the automatic camera did a good job of pointing towards what you wanted it to point at anyway. You can center the camera behind you, you can enter first person mode, and you can spin the camera wherever you want using the D-pad. The primary issue with the controls is that there isn't a way of quickly assigning new gadgets to the face buttons. A lot of times throughout the game you'll need more than 4 gadgets, and you'll be constantly needing to switch between them in the menu. The menu is quick and responsive, but constantly having to stop the game and flick through a menu is a chore, and a snappier way of switching is definitely needed. The music in Ape Escape 2 beats the original game by a mile. The original's music was good, don't get me wrong, but it all sort of blended together and didn't do a good job of distinguishing each stage from each other, despite me being a fan of the actual musical style. However, in Ape Escape 2, the style has changed and it does a much better job of fitting with the level themes. It's a lot more fitting with the cartoony visuals, and each song is bouncy and doesn't get repetitive. However, despite being better than Ape Escape 1's music, I do still find it to be unmemorable for the most part. I think it's just that the melodies used just don't stand out when they're apart from the game, but they are really good when played with the game, so I can't complain too much. The general sound design is perfect, giving you a noise for each item found, each gadget makes a unique and suitable sound effect, and hitting enemies makes an over-the-top thud. Capturing monkeys feels awesome because of the electronic noise that happens every time you do so. The voice acting was quite bad in the first game, and it's not that much better this time around either. It is a step up, but only one step up. The characters all sound a little bit too squeaky and annoying. The delivery of certain lines is very awkward and it takes you out of the moment a lot of the time. The main issue though is that they ruined Spectre's voice. In the European version of the first game, he had a deep, very typical British bad guy voice, which suited him really well, but now he just sounds like a child and it makes him a lot less threatening. And the funny juxtaposition between the deep bad guy voice and the way he throws tantrums is completely gone.
It might sound like a dislike Ape Escape 2, but nothing could be further from the truth. I actually really like it. It's just got several niggling problems and things that it should have done better than the first game but doesn't, which in my opinion makes the first game the overall better experience.
Ape Escape 2 does do a lot better, especially in terms of visuals and level themes, but I just feel that 1 set the foundation and did pretty much everything right, and 2 didn't build enough on that foundation to make it stand apart enough. However, if you've not got a way to play Ape Escape 1, or the PS1 graphics completely put you off, but you still like the look of the gameplay, I still very highly recommend Ape Escape 2. Or perhaps you've never played an Ape Escape game and you're looking to get into it, which is easy to do now it's on PS4 for a really good price. Ape Escape 2 is as good a place as any to start. I give Ape Escape 2 a 7 out of 10. It's a great 3D platformer and one which I recommend if you're looking for some light-hearted fun and aren't fussed about some small issues and the childish voice acting and aesthetic. Thanks for watching my review. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, comment below and subscribe if you want. If you want to stay up to date with what games I'm playing and all of my written reviews, you can look at my blog which is linked below in the description. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and I'll see you all soon.